Hello everyone and welcome back to the good stuff. We are continuing the 1858 match between Paul Charles Morphy and Adolf Anderssen, and this is game 11. So in game 10, if you've been following what's been happening so far, Morphy had the opportunity to end the match completely because the rules of the match are first to 7 wins the match, and Morphy already has 6 wins, and well, he could have ended it, but Anderssen got his second win. And now, maybe Anderssen can bounce back in the match, but he will still need to win a lot of games. He only won 2 so far, and that's against Morphy, even that is considered a lot. But if he can win 5 more, then he wins the match. So let's see what happens in this one, as here, Anderssen will again try a very, very interesting opening, but that involves a very interesting story about this opening, but we'll get to that. So Morphy with the white pieces in game 11 opens with e4, and Anderssen goes for e6. He chooses the French defense for his 11th game. d4, we have g6 now, and bishop to d3. We have bishop to g7, and now bishop to e3. Again, Morphy places his bishops on d3 and on e3, and Lowenthal says that this is considered somewhat of a novelty, but not really. What the Morphy is doing here, he's repeating a game Anderssen already played in 1851. If you remember, we mentioned that Anderssen won a great tournament in London in 1851, and he had this position against none other than Howard Staunton. And that game was a very interesting one, but we're gonna discuss it a little bit more. But basically, Lowenthal says that the student cannot fail of observing that in almost every French game Mr. Morphy plays, his bishops are on e3 and on d3, and they appear well placed there and come into efficient action when called upon. It is a novelty, however, in chess play, and will doubtless meet with attention at the hands of authors of the game. Although it's not actually a novelty, I guess Morphy knows what he's doing, because he was preparing to meet Staunton, and of course he probably studied all of Staunton's games, so now he's very well versed in the secrets of this opening, but not really. And this is what I mean. Here Anderssen plays c5, and this move is a move that Staunton also played against him in London in 1851, but it's a terrible move. Now we know it's a terrible move, but in those days I guess it was considered standard practice. I mean, white grabbed the center with the d4 and e4. Makes sense to challenge him with c5, sort of a Sicilian dragon type of idea. But the problem is, black can very happily capture this. If d captures on c5 is played, and now black captures this on b2, we simply play knight d2. And if black captures the rook, this position is, well, close to winning for white. How do you defend the rook? You can play knight f6, then bishop to g5, and if you play f6, well, then knight to c4, the knight is coming to d6, and it's just terrible position for black. The dark square weaknesses around the black king will be ever present. There's no fixing that, and this is, well, they're already very close to winning. So interestingly, Morphy doesn't capture, d captures on c5, he just plays c3, defends the center like Anderssen did against Staunton in the London tournament of 1851, and now comes c captures, and now we take a different path than Staunton did. Here Anderssen plays knight to c6, and this is a fine move, but Staunton played queen to b6, he was greedy and went after that b2 pawn, and then the game continued knight to e2. Staunton grabbed the pawn, knight beat to c3, and now you have to go back. Rook to b1 is coming, so queen to b6, and now Anderssen played rook to c1, and he won a very nice game. Basically, all of his pieces are already developed, but even stronger than Anderssen's rook 8 to c1 is knight to b5. This is just completely crushing. There's no real way for black to continue any sort of development here. It's just, I mean, there's d5 opening up a discovery to the queen. You can't really continue developing if you play something like knight f6, then e5 is coming, and if knight to d5, for example, knight to d6 check is then possible. Now we have a nice outpost here, and this is just, well, lost for black. But okay, after c captures on d4, we have knight to c6 by Anderssen, and now it's basically as of move 6 that we have a completely new game. But a lot of consideration went into this. So Morphy continues, knight to e2, now knight g to e7. We have castles by both players, and now knight b to c3. And here Anderssen strikes in the center with the d5, and the black got a very comfortable position, which should not be possible. You know, he played the French which his light square bishop will very soon be developed. It doesn't sound like it should be possible. That's because it's not, because Anderssen also played that c5 move, which should lose you the game on the spot, but it worked, and now he has a fairly comfortable game. So e5, and now Anderssen tries to undermine the center with f6. Morphy plays f4, not f3. Morphy plays f4, and now we have f captures on e5, f captures, and now a6. Played like there is really nothing in the position, but Morphy doesn't agree. Morphy plays queen to d2. He's ready to exchange the dark square bishops. Also bishop to g5 will be very annoying, and he has his rooks connected, whereas Anderssen still needs to develop the light square bishop somehow to connect his rooks and try to use the f-file for his own rooks. So here we have knight to b4, attacking Morphy's bishop on d3, but Morphy doesn't care. You can't really save the bishop. Bishop to b1 is not an option because the rook is still on a1, so just bishop to g5. Anderssen grabs the light square bishop, Morphy captures, and now bishop to d7. Anderssen is now ready to get his other rook into the game, hopefully develop the queen somehow, but it's still very difficult to connect the rooks. You can't move the queen, the knight will be hanging here. If you try some h6 moves, then, well, your king is already, filling the draft. You don't want to make it even worse. So here, Morphy goes queen to h3. It's a very, very, very strong move. The problem is if Anderssen continues recklessly, let's say he plays b5, wants to play rook to c8 and so on, queen h4, there's a double attack on the knight, and now what do? You have to defend it, rook to e8, and good luck unpinning this. The queen will never be able to move, the knight will not be able to move, and, white has such a good position that he could even probably afford some like knight to d1 to e3 to g4 to f6 just to, win the game without much trouble. But okay, after queen to h3, Anderssen plays the absolute best move. He just unpins. Now the knight can move to f5 if needed. And here, Morphy just continues with knight to g3. If this was a modern game, we would no doubt see a move like g4 preventing this knight from reaching f5. But Morphy says, no, this is not a problem. I'm going to play knight to g3. And now Anderssen just continues development. Rook to c8, still waiting with this knight to f5 move. And now Morphy trades off a pair of rooks. So he waited just the right time to trade off this pair of rooks, so this rook can come to f1 with tempo. So rook captures on f8, queen captures, now rook to f1. Again, the queen has to keep an eye on the knight, so queen to e8, and now queen to h4. Now there's a double attack on the knight, and you have to decide here whether to defend it, maybe a bit of a passive move, bishop to f8, but it gets the job done, and it's not easy for Morphy to organize some sort of an attack here. But Anderssen decides to go for the more active move, knight to f5, and this is now a problem. Morphy now just captures the knight, we have knight captures on f5, and the reason this is good is because you have to play g captures on f5. If you play e captures, then you lose this pawn, and then Morphy has to connect it pass pawns in the center, of course a completely winning position. So after knight captures on f5, g captures on f5 was played, but now we have access, along the h-file, and here our good friend the rook says bonjour, and he plays rook to f3. Now rook is coming to h3, maybe to g3, and it's not going to be easy. Bishop to f6 instead of rook to f3 also works, but we're going to play both of those moves, so it doesn't really matter in what order. And now Anderssen has to find a good move, but there doesn't seem to be a good move. If you trade off the dark square bishop, then you're basically left with a light square bishop, and all of your pawns are on light square, so it's basically your bishop will be like a pawn. I mean, that's already positionally lost, so you have to figure out how to play this. h5 is one such move that maybe allows Anderssen to remain in the game, not allowing this bishop to h6 or bishop to f6 ideas. Now the pawn is nicely defended. If Morphy wants, Morphy could go after it with rook to h3, but I think to survive the attack, Anderssen would gladly give up a pawn and try and fight with his bishop pair. But okay, here after rook to f3, Anderssen played bishop to b5. He says, I'm just going to put my bishop here. It's not doing all that much, but if you ever want to capture it, at least I'm gonna get rid of my useless bishop. So here Morphy plays rook to g3. Now he's aligning the rook with the king. Bishop to f6 is coming. Rook to c7, adding another defender here, and now bishop to f6. And here, there really isn't a good move for Anderssen because the position is so beautiful that you can win it any way you want, but it's actually really, really simple. So what white just needs to do is, let's say you capture the bishop, black captures, and you play queen to h6, and that's it. There's really no way of defending this. Then you will have all the time in the world to improve your position before trading all of your pieces on the g7 square and just winning the endgame. We're going to discuss this a little bit more just so it becomes clearer, but here Anderssen played f4, and Morphy praises this move. He says that this is the only move that basically fends off the attack, but I will show you one line, and here we're gonna have a pause the video moment in this hypothetical line that didn't happen, and this is our good friend Johann Jakob Blumenthal says that Morphy comments on this after this game, and he says had Anderssen played king to h8, it's a very straightforward victory in only like 13-14 moves, and this is the line that Morphy gives. So if Anderssen unpinned, Morphy would trade right away. Rook captures on g7, rook captures on g7, knight captures on b5, queen captures on b5, you don't want to ruin your pawn structure. Queen to h6 now, threatening checkmate, queen to d7, defending checkmate, and now we have the position that we discussed. Now white can play any move that white wants, and he can improve the position as much as he wants before trading here, because black really doesn't have an option here. So this is the line that Morphy gives. h4, black has to waste moves, there's nothing to be done here. We're going to play h5, now black again has to wait moves, queen to c7, now we're going to play a3, improve our position as much as possible, queen to d7, and now king to f2, even bring the king into the game. Queen to f7, we're going to play king to f3, and after queen to c7, let's say we're going to play g3. And now after queen to d7, finally we trade everything on the g7 square. Queen captures, and now comes h6. This is the move that Morphy had in mind. Queen captures on f6, e captures on f6, and now king to g8. We have king to f4, and here Morphy says, Morphy says something, but I'm not going to tell you what Morphy says here. So feel free to pause the video and try to find the only move that doesn't lose for black while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on spotting the only move that doesn't lose for Anderssen in this hypothetical line. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it is king to f8, gaining the long opposition here. And now it's not going to be possible for white to win this. But in his analysis after the game, Morphy said king to f7, and white just wins the game with king to e5. And while this is true, you don't have to play king to f7. Now, it's hard to say if Morphy actually said this. Maybe Lowenthal just said that Morphy said this so he could maybe criticize him. Although he doesn't criticize him, Lowenthal just, gives the variation without commenting on it at all. But it wasn't uncommon for players, after the game to analyze the position blindfold, so they didn't really move the pieces over the board. They would just, discuss moves. So maybe this is something that Morphy missed, but the position is, even before this, is winning in so many ways that of course, if Anderssen actually played king to h8, I don't see that Morphy would make this mistake. But after king to f7, of course, the position is now nicely winning for white. After king to f8, you don't really have a win. If you try king to e5, then the position can even go very wrong for you. Now king to f7, and now white is the one that has to move and allow king captures on f6. You don't really have a way. If you try and just waste some moves here, you will run out of moves, and you're going to have to move your king. We're going to capture on f6, and black is the one that's going to be winning. So here, if king to f8 is played, Morphy would have to play g4, just for the fun of the position. Captures. Now king f7, king g5, and now we have a draw. King to g8, king to f4, and now king to f8, king to g4. So again, not allowing black to gain the upper hand. King to f7, we're going to play king to g5. Everything is fine. This is a draw. Just something I wanted to, show you because it's a lot of fun. But here, king to h8 was not played. Anderssen played f4, and Morphy said, all right, this is a move that really ruins my attack, but only briefly. So queen captures on f4, and now queen to f8. So what do you play here? Knight captures on b5. It's not a problem. Now the queen covers the c1 square, so you don't have rook to c1 check. A captures on b5, and now queen to h6. So basically, Morphy gets pretty much the same position, only now black is down a pawn, and his pawns on the queen side are doubled. So it's much better than the line Morphy discussed after king to h8. So now king to h8, Anderssen unpins, but now Morphy just captures. Rook captures on g7, rook captures, and again, there's no rush here. We've reached the position from the thumbnail. Now Morphy starts improving the position. He's going to move some pawns, move the king, if Anderssen allows it. Anderssen does not allow it. He plays king to g8, and now you have to capture because now the rook can move. So queen captures on g7, queen captures, with bishop captures, king captures, and now king to f3. So now Morphy has a better position. He's up a pawn. This is now completely winning for him. We have b4 by Anderssen, we have g4 by Morphy, and now b6. We have h4, now comes b5, and now king to e3. Now Morphy will simply bring his king over here, pick up the pawns, and win the game. So Anderssen plays b3, tries to mess up Morphy's pawn structure by giving up another pawn, and while capturing on b3 is still winning for Morphy, I think Morphy wanted to end the game in a poetic fashion, and he played a3. So here it was in this position, on move 36, that Adolf Anderssen resigned the game, and with it the entire match, as Morphy now has 7 wins, and I think it's beautiful that the move that ended the match is pawn to a3, which is the move that Anderssen employed in 3 of the games, and basically the move that gave Morphy the most trouble in the match. Even though in that opening, we called it the grand opening, Morphy won 1, lost 1, and 1 game ended in a draw. Anderssen had just a great position in all 3 games, and it could have gone either way. But I think the turning point in the match was game 3, after which Anderssen no longer wanted to reply e5 to Morphy's e4, because that game just didn't go well for him, and then he just lost 5 in a row. So I think it could have been a much different match, but we don't have to guess, because this is not the only match the two of them have played, and we're gonna show this match as well. It is our next destination in the Morphy saga, because the match took place the next day. So they all got together, and they were ready to get a group photograph, and while they were waiting for photographers to set everything up, they played a match. It took 3 hours, and they played 6 games, and all 6 games featured the King's Gambit. So yes, the next in the Morphy saga is another match between Morphy and Anderssen, where King's Gambit will be played in all 6 games. Yes, I know it's hard to believe that something this good exists, but it does, and we're gonna enjoy it. And then we'll see what happens in the Morphy saga after that. If any of you are interested, the final game of the match took place on 28th of December, so a little bit before New Year's, and this game lasted for 4 hours. So we're ready for the next day for their match, and that's it for this match. Morphy wins it with a result of 7 wins to 2, and 2 of the games were drawn. And as Anderssen so finally states in the quote above the board, Morphy is the finest chess player who ever existed. He is far superior to any now living, and would doubtless have beaten Labourdonnais himself. Well, there's no way for us to know this. I think chances are that Morphy would definitely crush him. But yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. We're gonna discuss more about the Morphy saga after the other match against Anderssen, but that's it for now. I would like to thank Tom Deralo, happy birthday Will, Simon Novak, Gordon Gutman, and Harry Walk for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of the Morphy saga until it ends. Thank you all, I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.